We have been talking about creation, haven't we? Investigating creation. And I've been asking you guys a question every time we come. Can anybody remember that question that we've been asking, that we started with on our very, very first week? Does anybody remember? Yes?
What is evolution?
Well, almost. Here's our question. How did the world begin? And we have two answers that we've been saying most people will give you. What's the first one? Okay, God created it. And what do we call that? What's that big word that means God? What is it? No, not hypothesis. Hypothesis is just a guess that we think something might be true. It starts, to creation. Good. And then what was the other answer that we talked about? All right, evolution. Good. So here's our evolution. And very quickly we said evolution. People that believe in evolution will say that it started with an explosion thousands, millions, billions of years ago. And out of that explosion there was a little cell. And then over time, that cell became more complex, and then that complex cell developed into other things. Everything kept changing until finally we got the animals, the plants, the people, and all of those things. And so we've kind of talked about that already. And then, yes, you told us about creation, the fact that God created the world, and how long did it take him to create the world? Who can tell me? How many? 6 days, that's right. Not billions of years, but just 6 days. All right, what did we say filled the world at the very beginning of the time? Emptiness, that's right. Or we talked about darkness. Good, very good job. Who was the only person or only being there at that time? Yes, Keegan. Yeah, God was. Very good. All right, and then I want us all to shout this one out. Where would we find the record in the Bible of creation? Everybody say it really loud.
Genesis.
Oh, good. Yes, Genesis is where we find that. Good. All right, now, what did God make on the first day? We've already talked about it tonight, so even if you weren't here a few weeks ago, what did God make? Hannah, can you help us out? Let's see if we can help you out up here. Does that give you any ideas? You have to say it really loud. Okay, good. He made the light, and he divided that light, so we had day and night. Very good. All right, then, on day 2, we said there was something all around the earth, all over the earth, all above the earth. Landon. All right, the water, and then you're right, he made the sky in order to divide that water. Very good job. All right, then on the third day, we said that he gathered the land together. And what did he call that land? Do you remember the verse that we looked at last week? What did he call it? Earth. Good. And then he also divided the water. And what did he call the waters? Seas. Good job. Very good job. All right, then what else did he make on the third day? He made the dry land, and there was a lot of other things he made. Can anybody remember? Okay, yes, in the back. Plants. Good. All kinds of plants. We had trees, we had grass, we had flowers, we had bushes, all kinds of things there. Then, not only did God make all those plants, but he also made something in each plant in order to help it make new plants, just like itself. What do we call those things? Yes, Kaylee? All right, yeah, and so we talked about this bean seed that we would grow, and we would plant it, and we would see all of that growth that would come. Good. Now, every time God wanted to make something, how did he make it? Did he go into his laboratory? Did he find all these chemicals and just come up with something? Yes, Hannah. Okay, good. He spoke, and just like that, it was done. Very good job. Then, last review question. When God looked at all the things that he had made up here, what did he say? What were those words? Yes. All right, yeah, it was good. He was very happy. God had a plan. We've been talking about God's plan, haven't we? And he had a plan on how he was going to create things, and he was working according to his plan. And so now today we want to continue on and find out, what did he do on the fourth day? That's what we're talking about today. Now, we said on the third day that in our picture he would have made plants and flowers and trees. If we had plants and flowers and trees, what is something that they would definitely need? Something really, really, really important that they would need. Yes. Okay, they would definitely need water, but there's already water on the earth, right? So what was the other thing you said? The sun. That's right, because we don't have the sun yet, do we? But God knew that everything that was living was going to need the sunlight, didn't he? So on the fourth day, God made the sun, that big bright sun right there. And he knew everything was going to need that in order to survive. Now, if you remember, we said on the first day that God made light. Was that the sun? No, that was not the sun. That was some kind of a light that God made, and he made it so that we would have a day and night, but it wasn't the sun. All right, then we said on the fourth day, this is when God is making the sun. Now, the sun is really important. As you can see in these pictures up here, plants need sunlight, don't they? That's one of the important things that they need. And if they don't get the right sunlight, then they won't grow like they're supposed to. But what else needs sunlight? People need sunlight too, don't we? We need to get warm. Not too warm, but just enough warm, right? So here's some people enjoying that sunlight. Now, we also mentioned this the very first week that we were here. And so if you were here, you might remember. But we talked about how that the earth is just the right distance from the sun. And we talked about this the first week. What would happen if the earth was closer to the sun? Does anybody know what would happen to earth? Kaylee? Mm-hmm. Okay, it would get so hot, things would just burn up, wouldn't they? Nothing would be able to live on the earth if it were any closer to the sun. What would happen if the earth were farther away from the sun? Everything would get too cold, wouldn't it? So God knew exactly where to put the earth and where to put the sun and to keep them in those places. Do you think that was by accident? Or do you think somebody smart planned that? I think somebody smart planned that. Who was that somebody smart? God, right. All right, now, when we talk about the sun, the Bible tells us that when God made the sun, he also made time. God made the earth so it goes around the sun. And who can read that big word that's up there on the screen? All right, Hannah. Revolve. And the word revolve simply means it's going to go around. So God made the earth so it will stay in a path, and it's going to follow that path and go around the sun and keep following that same path every time. Now, how many of you remember how long does it take the earth to go around the sun? Yes. 1 full year. It takes, well, my picture says 365 days. Is that right? Does it take exactly 365 days? If you ever hear it in science, it's actually just a little bit longer than 365 days. It's 365 and 1/4 of a day. But we don't count that 1/4. But have you ever heard of a leap year? Yeah, well, on that leap year, we collect 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4 for 4 years, and we give it one extra day in the leap year. But you're right, we would just call this a year. So it takes the earth a whole year to go all the way around the sun. So at the same time that the earth is going around the sun, it's also spinning round and round itself. And we call that rotating. How long, do you know how long it takes the earth to rotate like this until it gets to the same spot again? Yes? 24 hours or a day. Right. Now, God made the earth and the sun and the moon to work like this, to keep rotating and keep revolving. When he made the earth, that was several thousand years ago. And do you know that the earth continues in the same path around the sun, and it does that every 365 and a fourth days? And every 24 hours, the earth continues to go around and around and around on its axis. God made it that way, and it continues to be that way. And again, do you think that was an accident? Do you think that just happened to do that? No. We see that God designed it that way. And that's the same thing that we've been saying every week. We look at everything on our earth, and we see there is design. God was a great designer. Oh, here we go. We've been looking in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 16. Let's go ahead and read that together, all right? So Genesis 1:16, and it says, "And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also." Good. We've been reading in Genesis chapter 1, and we just keep taking verses here and there from that, finding out what God did. And so this is talking about day number 4, and the first thing that God made on day number 4, what does this verse say? What did he make? Well, that's not the first thing in our verse. What's the first thing it mentions? Okay, he made 2 great lights, and then it talks about the greater light. What do you think that is? The sun, and you can see that in our picture right here. And then it also talks about what else? Kaylee? Okay, the stars, but it also mentions the moon first. So the sun gives light during the daytime and made the moon and the stars to shine at night. Now, there's something interesting about the moon. When we look up at the sun, we can tell it's really bright, can't we? Because we can't really even stand to look at the sun very long, or even really all the way. We kind of have to hold something in front of our eyes, don't we? Because it's so bright. But do you know about anything about the moon and the light that it has? Does the moon make its own light? Kaylee? It actually doesn't make any light at all. The sun makes all kinds of light. It's full of light. But the moon makes 0 light. It's a reflector. So when you see the moon out there at night, that isn't the moon's light. It's the rays from the sun that are being reflected on the moon. And you might say, well, the moon isn't near as bright. And you're right, it's not, because it only reflects just a little portion of the sun's rays. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And you might also say, you know, sometimes I look at the moon and it doesn't always look the same. Like, is the moon always look like a big ball like it is up in this picture? No, it doesn't, does it? Sometimes it might look like some of these moons, right? Yeah, we have crescents, and sometimes they're like a half of a moon, called the phases of the moon. And so tonight, when we go over to our labs, we're going to learn about how does the moon only shine this much or all of it? Why is it like that? So we'll learn about that a little bit later. Then we also said that God made the stars. I don't know about you, but I love to go outside and look at the stars. I love it when it's not cloudy and I can go and I can find at least a few of the stars out there. Did you know, though, that the sun is really a star? Yeah. But how come the sun is so bright, and when I look at these stars, they just look like a little dot of light? Well, how come that is if they're both stars? Because what? I can't hear you. Because they're parents? Oh, planets. Well, no, they're all stars. Keegan, do you know? Yes, exactly. The sun is the closest star to the earth. That's why it looks so big and so bright. But did you know that most of these stars here are way bigger than the sun? But they are so much farther away that they look like just a little speck of light compared to the sun. So very good job, Keegan. All right, now, also I have another question for you. Have you ever tried to count the stars before? Yeah. Have you been able to count all the stars? No. Do you know scientists thought they could count all the stars too? They thought they had them all counted and they knew all the stars. And then a long time ago, they developed the telescope. And when the first person looked in the telescope and looked out into the sky, he saw that there were tons, like billions of stars that they had never seen before. And the scientists decided it's impossible to count all the stars. But do you know, even though the scientists cannot count the stars, there is somebody who can. Let's look in the Bible and see what it says. Up in Psalms 147, verse 4, it says, He telleth the number of the stars. And that word telleth just means He counts. So that He is talking about God. God can count all the stars. All those billions and billions of stars. God can count every one of them. But you know what's even more exciting? Look at the rest of the verse. And He calleth them all by their names. Can you imagine that God can count every single one of the stars, but He's also given every star a name? I have to tell you, sometimes you guys come to class on Wednesday and I see you and I say, oh, what's her name? What's his name? I forgot from last week. Some of you don't even know my name, do you? My name's not Sandy. See? You don't even know my name. And think about a God who knows and counts billions of stars and knows all their names. Isn't that amazing? I think that's really amazing. Yes. All right, now, I have one other cool picture to show you. How many of you either saw this on Sunday night, not this last Sunday night, it's been a couple weeks ago, but Cosmic Kristen. Have you ever seen Cosmic Kristen? Yeah, have you ever seen Cosmic Kristen show you this picture? One Sunday night, she showed us this picture in church. Does anybody know what the name of this thing is? Maybe you just know what it is anyway, but maybe you saw it. Yes. It is a dying star. Do you remember its name? It's called the Helix Nebula. And nebula just means it's like a gaseous material. But the inside of that is a dying star. You're absolutely right. But even if you didn't know the name of it, what might you say it looks like? What does it look like up there? Well, maybe.
It looks like an eye.
Yeah, it looks like an eye. And do you know what some people have nicknamed this? They called it the Eye of God. Because it's a cluster of stars that's way far away up in the sky. And so they feel like it's God who's in the heaven watching everyone. But I thought that was pretty cool to look at. And you know what? There's a lot of other objects in the sky that are so much fun to look at and that are really beautiful. And guess who made all those things? God did, that's right. Now, some people will tell you that the sun, the moon, the stars, all these things just happened by accident. But no, we've looked tonight and we've seen that there is design. They stay where they're supposed to stay. They go in their orbit. They keep following what they're supposed to do. And even all of these things that God has made just show that there's really a designer, a creator that did all those things. And I just want to close tonight with just 2 verses. And so let's look at these verses. And one of these verses, I know you're going to know, okay? This verse here is the very first book of the Bible. And most of the people that say that God didn't create the earth, that everything just happened by accident, most of the people that say that, they don't really believe the Bible. But we talked about this on our first week. There's lots of evidence to say that the Bible is true. And if the Bible's true, whatever it says is also true. So in this verse, who does it say created the heaven and the earth? God did. So if the Bible says it, then I can believe that God did it, and it didn't happen by accident. And I told you, this is the very first book in the Bible. But if we go to the New Testament, there's another verse in John 1:3, and it says, all things were made by him, God, and without him was not anything made that was made. So God is telling us that he made everything, and nothing could be made without him. I hope when you look at the sun, the moon, when you look at the stars next time at night, that you will remember that these things were designed by somebody, and that somebody was God, because he is a wonderful creator. All right, now we've got a few questions, and then we're going to go to do our lab experiments. So let's see how well you were listening. What did we say is super important that all plants and trees and flowers might need that we hadn't talked about before? Landon. Sunlight. Good. What did God create on the 4th day? There were actually 3 different things, so I'm looking for 3 answers. Yes.
The sun, moon, and stars.
Awesome. Good job. All right. Is the sun the same as the light that God made on the 1st day?
No.
No, it isn't, is it? Good. What would happen if the earth were closer to the sun? Landon?
Everything would start to die.
Okay, because it would be too hot. Good. And what if it were farther away? Kaylee?
It would be too cold.
It would be too cold. Good. How long, listen real carefully, how long does it take the earth to revolve? That's your key word, revolve around the sun. Hannah? A year, good. And we said that was, if you really want to impress your friends, how long is that? Awesome job, good job. All right, now, how long does it take the earth to rotate? Or that means to spin like in a circle. Okay, yes.
24 hours.
Okay, 24 hours or 1 day. Very good job. All right, how does the moon get its light? Keegan. Sorry, Kaylee. From the sun, that's right. What is the sun really? What did we say it really is? Hannah? A star. Good. What 2 facts did we learn about stars from Psalms that only God knows? 2 things that only God knows. Yes? Okay, how many stars there are? And he knows them all by name. Very good job. Last question, and you guys are going to shout out this answer for me, all right? Did the sun, moon, and stars just appear by accident or chance?
No.
Oh, I couldn't hear you.
No.
Oh, very good, very good. All right, awesome job today. All right, so we're on lab for day number 4. We talked about in our lesson today how God made the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so right now we're going to talk about just a little bit about the moon. So one of the things that we discussed in our story was the fact that the moon does not make its own light. The sun is really bright in the sky, But the moon, it does not actually make its own light. It simply reflects the light that the sun is giving to it. And the things that I read said even all the rays of the sun that go to the moon, it only reflects 8% of what the rays that come to it. So that's why it's not necessarily as bright as the sun. So today we want to just show you a little something. Today I just brought one of these little reflectors, okay? And we're going to show you, this is sort of what the moon is like. This reflector does not have light in itself, okay? But when we shine a light on it, it will reflect. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the lights. And when we turn off the lights, you can no longer see this reflector, can you? No. You might see the outline or the shape of it, but you don't see the red part at all. And then when I take a flashlight and I put the flashlight on it, now look and see how that will reflect. And now you can see the red part that's on it. All right, and this is something sort of like what the moon would be like. It doesn't make its own light whatsoever, but when the sun, like my flashlight, shines on the reflector, now it shines or it shows its light. All right, so now we're going to do another demonstration about the moon. Right now we want to talk about the phases of the moon. And again, we mentioned this a little bit in our lesson, how sometimes we look up in the sky and we see the moon and we'll have this big full moon, this big round circle. And other times we look up in the sky and we just see this tiny little sliver of a moon. Those are what we call the phases of the moon. And so we're going to explain a little bit about how they work and what they're called right now. Now, you might say, well, why do we have phases of the moon, or what's their purpose? Well, the moon itself is to give light to the earth at nighttime, but it also helps determine different times and also our seasons. So those are some of the purposes of it. Now, in our kind of experiment today, we're going to have 3 different objects. You can see back here, we have this yellow circle. That's going to represent our sun. And then we have this great big ball here that's going to represent our earth, and you can see the oceans and the land that's there. And then we also have this small little ball here, and that's going to represent our moon. Now, I know our proportions are really not correct. We're not really worried so much about that. We like this world, though, the earth, so we're going to use that to remind us about the earth. But really, the sun is many, many, many times bigger than the earth, okay? And so they're not in the right size proportion, and in order to be able to just do this according to our space, they're not in the right space or the distance proportion either about how far they would be from each other. So just keep that in mind, all right? We've already discussed as well that the moon itself does not have its own light. It simply reflects the light of the sun. And so if you look at our moon, you'll see that our moon, part of it is black, and part of it is white. And the moon itself does not really rotate around. So the white side, or over here, this is always going to be the lit side, and this side is always going to be facing the sun. So as it goes around the earth, it doesn't change its position. This lit side is always going to be facing the sun. And the part that we see as darkness, that's the side of the moon that never gets the sunlight, all right? And so that's why we have it here. All right, so go ahead and stand right here in between our sun and our earth. And we say that the phases of the moon always start with this here. And in my pocket here, I've got some words. And this first word is the new moon. We call it the new moon because that's where the phase really starts, okay? And at the new moon, if you were to look into the sky, it's like the moon disappeared. It wouldn't be there because it's there. It's just that because the sun is behind it, we're not getting to see the light that's reflected off the moon. So this is called the new moon. All right, then as the days go on, the moon is going to start moving this way a little bit. So you're going to come a little bit, maybe about right here. Now remember, we're not going to change the position of our moon at all, but now if you were on Earth, this is what you would see on Earth, which should just be a little sliver of the light. And of course, it also has a name. Its name is the waxing crescent. That little kind of sliver-like shape, that's called a crescent shape. And waxing is a word that means it's getting bigger. So therefore, we're going to call it the waxing crescent. All right, then our moon is going to continue on in its cycle around the Earth. And so now if you were on Earth, you would be right here. And now you should be seeing about half of the moon lit up. And of course, it has a name as well. And this time it's going to be called the first quarter. Now, some of you might say, how come I see half of the sun and you call it first quarter? Because that doesn't seem like they go together. But if you know anything about quarters, when we divide something into quarters, we divide it into 4 parts. And so if you were to take a circle and to divide that into half, and then to divide both of those halves in half again, you'd have 4 parts. And this is like from our beginning, our new moon stage, until here, we have now covered 1/4 of our circle. And that's why it's called the first quarter. All right, now our moon is going to continue to go around the Earth a little bit more. And remember, you got to keep that lit side always facing the sun. All right, good. All right, now this one here is kind of a strange name. It's called the gibbous. And gibbous, I'm not really sure what that word means. I've forgotten. I looked it up, but I forgot what it meant. But the word waxing, I already told you what that means. Do you remember? Yeah, it means it's getting a little bit bigger. So right now, we call this phase of the moon the waxing gibbous. All right, then our moon is going to continue until it's now on the other side of the Earth, and it's facing directly the sun. And when you look up in the sky now, you should see a whole ball of light, like a whole circle. And of course, most of you probably know this. It's called the full moon because it looks like a full circle. Very good job. All right, now we're not done. The moon is going to continue to go in that circle, and it's going to go until about right there. Going to make sure and keep that lit side always to the sun. Now, we went from no moon at all that we could see to over here to the full moon where we got the full circle. And now you're going to see, instead of increasing the light side that you'll be able to see, we're going to start getting the light side is going to start getting smaller. And so again, we're going to have that word gibbous, only this time instead of waxing, which means it's getting bigger, we have this word and it says waning. Waning means it's getting smaller. So when we can see not quite a full circle, but not a half yet, it's called the waning gibbous. All right, then our moon is continuing to go around the Earth, still keeping that lit side to the sun. And now if you were on Earth, you should see again about half of the moon will be lit up. Only this time it'll be this half that you see. Now it's still the same half. We were just on the other side of the circle. And this time, instead of the first quarter, it's going to be called the third quarter. And again, it's not how much of the moon that you're seeing, but it's because our moon has now gone 3/4 of the way around the circle or the cycle that it's going to go. All right, the moon is going to continue to go on its way, keeping that lit side still to the sun. And now you should only see a tiny little bit of the lit side. And we talked about it over on this side. Whenever we see just that tiny little bit, it's called a crescent. And this time, instead of being called the waxing, it's called the waning because it's getting smaller. The lit side that we can see is getting smaller. All right, good. And then the moon keeps going. Got to keep that lit side all the way to the moon or to the sun, and then we get right back to the place that we started with. And now you can see again, we don't see any of the lit side, do we? It's like it's dark. And again, we come back to the new moon, which is where we started. And so the moon does this every month. It takes almost a month. It's not quite 30 days. I think it's 29, 28 days, somewhere in there, that it takes for the moon to go all the way around the earth and come back to this new moon position. So that's a little bit about the phases of the moon. And maybe you can try this at home. You can use anything to be your sun. You can use a balloon to be the sun. You could use a balloon to be the earth. And this is just a styrofoam ball. And we painted one side of it black so that you could see the lit side and the dark side. So I hope you'll have fun a little bit learning about the different phases of the moon and how God made this. And he had a purpose for that. All right, our last experiment for today in our lab is about the stars, because on day number 4, God not only created the sun and the moon, but he also created the stars. And I think it's really fun to look up at the stars. There are some people who have kind of made what we call constellations, and that means there's some groups of stars, and some of them have named some of the different constellations that you can find. And today we've just taken 5 different constellations, and we are just going to look at them and kind of show you a little bit about them. And again, this is just some of the wonderful things that God has made. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we've got our 5 constellations. We had a form that we got off of the computer, the internet, and we took that and we just punched holes with a pencil on a piece of cardboard into our paper, and now we've made our constellation on this paper. And so I've got 5 different pieces of paper, and then we're just going to shine a flashlight onto the piece of paper, and we're going to reflect that constellation on the wall just so you can kind of see it. And then maybe sometime when you're outside, not necessarily in the city with a lot of lights, but if you look up in the sky, the Big Dipper is usually pretty easy to find, and you might have fun just seeing if you can locate some of those amazing stars that God has made. All right, so if we could get the lights, we're going to go ahead and start. And we're going to start with this first one. And I don't know if you know much about the different stars that we have, but this is one of the constellations that we have. And this one, does anybody know its name? This one is called the Big Dipper. And it kind of looks like something your mom might use in the kitchen, maybe to dip spaghetti sauce or a soup out. And so that's sort of how it got its name, called the Big Dipper. All right, now I'm going to get another one. The next one is really my favorite because I like to see this one in the sky. This one is called, does anybody know it? I guess I should ask that first. This one is kind of easy if you look in the sky to see. Do you see in the middle there's like 3 stars that all come together? Those are the ones that usually you can see in the sky, and they make the belt, and this is called Orion the Hunter. And so if you ever see those 3 stars that are sort of close together like that, now they're not going to be that close together in the sky, but you should be able to see 3 that are sort of close, then you'll know that is Orion the Hunter. All right, then we're going to come to another one. There's a lot of constellations out there. We're only looking at 5 of them today.
Here's another one. And this one you may not be able to know because I probably wouldn't be able to see this one in the sky. But this is supposed to make the big dog, or they call it Canis Major. And so you might have fun trying to look at it in the sky somewhere. All right, then we're going to show you another one. This one, see if you can tell me what it sort of looks like. Can you figure out what it sort of looks like? It sort of looks like a W in the sky, doesn't it? Yeah, or some people, depending on where it is in the sky, it might be turned the other way or sideways, and they'll think that it looks like an M. But I have heard before that it looks like the crown that might be on the queen. This is supposed to stand for Queen Cassiopeia. It also actually is supposed to be different points in her body, like her arms and her legs and her hips. But I like to remember it by just remembering the crown for the queen. All right, then we have another one, and this one is kind of a funny shaped one, but this one is called the scorpion or Scorpio. Let me see if I can get it a little better there. All right, and you can see where it really curls on the right hand side. Well, that is the tail, and the other ones are supposed to be where the head on the left side would be where the head of the scorpion is. Now this is just a basic outline, and they sort of fill in a little bit of where the rest of the shape of the body is. All right, I think that's our last one then. So we'll turn the lights back on, and we hope you've had fun in this lab trying to look at the different phases of the moon. And next time you go outside and you see the moon, I hope you'll try to remember, what was the name of the moon that I see up there today? And then why don't you try to look for some of these stars, especially I bet you could find the Big Dipper and see if you can see it, or maybe the 3 stars for Orion, the hunter, and see if you can see some of those things. We have to remember everything that we've talked about today, the sun, the moon, and the stars, all of them were made by our amazing God. All right, see you next week.